All right, so last week we were all horrified and appalled by what some are calling now an alleged gang rape. It ain't alleged when it's on video, kiddos. The whole justice system's going to have to think about changing now with all these cameras and all these still photos, all of this stuff and how it can be uploaded. It's up there in cyberspace, and that's the salt in the wounds. It wasn't bad enough that this young girl was drugged, dragged off from a party of hundreds of people, gang raped by young people, young men, and while they were doing it, they filmed it or took video of it and uploaded it to Facebook. Live streaming video. It was happening as it was happening. And then there are whether young people or other people around the planet downloading it themselves. And I want to remind anyone that's listening in our area, if you've downloaded or shared that, you're guilty of trafficking in child pornography. That's the facts, Jack. So I thought to myself, I wonder if the Young Offenders Act, and I do believe this too, empowers some of these young folks to do these dirty, diabolical criminal deeds. Because what's going to happen to me? I'm under 18. I'll get a slap in the wrist. Maybe have to wear an ankle bracelet and stay home on the couch for a year and play video games. If you're 18, it gets a little dicey. Apparently an 18-year-old man was just arrested. A 16-year-old was arrested last week. Apparently he was the guy that uploaded the pictures. Okay. Does the Young Offenders Young Offenders Act have to be tweaked or changed? I would think so, because it doesn't really look after these hard criminals. Okay. It's different, as I said, if we're talking about shoplifting or even stealing a car for a joyride. I know. That might be something that's, where rehabilitation and a different avenue of attack goes. But for violent crime, rapes and murders and assaults, aggravated assaults, I think we have to look elsewhere. And to get an idea of what the Conservative government has in mind for that kind of thing, Harold Albrecht, the MP for Kitchener-Conestoga, joins me now. Harold, good morning.
Good morning, Jeff.
I'm sure that you and your caucus were horrified by this British Columbia news last week, but that only brings me back to the Young Offenders Act, and we haven't talked about it for a while. I know that the Conservative government has tried to make some changes. Harold, where are we going with this?
Well, maybe first, Jeff, let me just clarify. It's now referred to as the Youth Criminal Justice Act.
Okay.
And there are some obvious glaring loopholes in that act. There's no question about it. And I think many of your listeners will recall that I've been working on that almost since the first day after I was elected, when I became aware of some very violent crimes that occurred in our area. Now, we introduced Bill C-4, and the intent of that bill is to close some of the most glaring loopholes that are there. And that's certainly on the books right now. But it's difficult in a minority parliament when you're trying to make what I consider to be some very common sense improvements. Invariably, these measures always face opposition from the other parties, in spite of the fact that they often say, well, yes, we're in favor of tougher laws, we're in favor of protecting society, and they say this when they're on the campaign trail, but too often, when it comes down to the vote to actually put teeth to the measures that need to be in place, they go the other way. So it's a very difficult position to be in.
Mr. Albrecht, now, or Harold, I'm sorry. We've known each other a little while now.
Harold's good.
To be on the devil's advocate side, okay, and I can hear what some of the opposition would be thinking now. They would agree that this was an egregious, terrible act. But because there's one act and one act stands out, that doesn't mean we unravel all these years of science and experience and everything.
And I think you'll find, Jeff, in the initiatives that we proposed a real good balance. We have prevention, we have enforcement, and we have rehabilitation. And too often, people on both sides of this issue can be guilty of polarizing it, and we can't have an either-or approach. I think it's a both-and the legislation that we've tabled certainly recognizes those facts.
Should we not be considering, in a case like this, some kind of, something harsher than, I'm not saying throw somebody in jail and throw away the key,
no.
but we don't seem to be laying down the law, if you will.
No, but Jeff, if you would, if your listeners would look up the details of Bill C-4, and they can do this on the government website. If C-4 was in place right now, these youths that we're speaking of earlier in your program, if convicted, these could have faced adult sentences. And this is part of the measure. Now, it's up to the courts to decide that based on the situation, specific situation. But I think you're absolutely right that we need to give, I'm not going to use the word harsh, I'm going to give the word, a clear message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. And one of the weaknesses of the current Youth Criminal Justice Act is that courts and judges may not use specific deterrents. In other words, if someone has been involved in a series of more minor offenses, the courts may not take into consideration that this is already a pattern and we can now sentence him with a little more strict sentence because of the previous patterns. C-4, the proposed legislation, would add specific deterrents to deter this specific individual from repeating this pattern of misbehavior, which has led in some cases to more informal measures. But now with this C-4 coming into place, we could actually take that into consideration, and the judge and the courts then could make a more appropriate sentence.
Now that takes me to my last question, Harold Albrecht. Despite all of this, unless it's in legislation and etched in stone, if you will, a lot of this comes down to how deals are done with the Crown and the judges and the defense attorneys, doesn't it still?
Well, it does at the end of the day, but Jeff, we still, right now, we're actually preventing judges from taking some of these measures. And I have heard from parents, I've heard from many people in our riding that they have actually asked the courts to be more clear and decisive with a more strict message. The courts are hobbled by the current Youth Criminal Justice Act, and that's a frustration to all of us.
Okay. Harold Albrecht, always a pleasure, sir.
Can I just make one
I have
more
1 minute left, Harold.
Okay,
it's all yours.
I just want to go on the record as saying that the frustrating point for me in all of this, and it's a terrible tragedy, but the frustrating part for me is that it occupies so much of our news cycle. And yes, we need to know about it. I agree with that. But my question is, where's the balance? Where are the positive stories about 99% of our youth that are contributing to society in so many ways? That's why in my office, Jeff, I take every chance I can to celebrate the positive achievements of youth in my riding. They might receive a certificate or a personal note. That could be an academic achievement, an athletic achievement, or some special service to their school or leadership in their community or their church. And I guess I would challenge the media that these are the positive achievements I'd like to see celebrated a lot more.
All right. I think I'll remember that.
Well, and you can share that with your colleagues. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much.